when I saw the for sale sign on my beach house. I thought it was a cruel joke. I remember the way the morning light hit the front porch that day, soft and golden, the kind that makes the sea look like melted glass. I was carrying a basket of lemons from the small tree I'd tended for 20 years, humming to myself when I froze. That red and white sign stood crooked in the sand, flapping in the salty wind. For sale. My heart began to race, the kind of uneven rhythm that only comes when something sacred is being torn away. At first, I thought maybe the neighbors had put it up by mistake. Maybe someone was selling the house next door. But no, the arrow pointed straight toward my own front gate. I walked closer, sand crunching beneath my slippers. There it was, bold as day, property of Coastal Realty. Contact agent, Marie Adams. Marie Adams, my daughter-in-law. The beach house wasn't just a property. It was a piece of my soul. My late husband Peter and I had built it the year after our son Daniel turned 10. Back then, the coast wasn't crowded, just fishermen, pelicans, and the gentle murmur of waves that became our nightly lullaby. Peter had wanted a place where we could hear our hearts think. That's how he used to say it. So we poured every ounce of our savings into it. White shutters, a wraparound porch, blue-trimmed windows to match the ocean. We spent summers there, then Christmases, then anniversaries, and when Peter passed away 5 years ago, that little house by the sea became my refuge, my place to breathe, to grieve, and eventually to smile again. Daniel had married Marie 2 years after Peter's death. She was polished, city-bred, business-minded, always in heels even at family picnics. I tried to love her. I really did, but she carried an air that didn't fit into the simplicity of our coastal life. Every time she visited, she would wrinkle her nose slightly at the old driftwood table, or comment on how quaint the kitchen was, the same kitchen Peter had built with his hands. Still, I believe she loved my son, and that was enough for me. That morning, staring at the sign, I called Daniel right away. My hands trembled as I held the phone. He didn't pick up the first time, nor the second. When he finally answered, his voice was casual. Too casual. "Mom? Everything okay?" "Daniel," I whispered, "why is there a for sale sign in front of my beach house?" Silence. Just the faint hum of traffic wherever he was. Then a hesitant sigh. "Mom, listen. There's something I was going to talk to you about." "Daniel," my voice cracked. "Please tell me this is some kind of mistake." He hesitated again, and in that pause, my heart sank. I already knew. "It's Marie," he said finally. She thought maybe it was time to sell. "You don't go there as much anymore, and—" "I go every week," I interrupted, my voice rising. "Every week, Daniel. That's your father's house. Our house." "I know, Mom," he said, softer now, like he was talking to a child. "But we've been having financial issues." Marie said. I didn't hear the rest. The waves were crashing louder in my ears, or maybe it was my pulse. I hung up before the tears came. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the smell of salt and lemon oil filling the air. The ocean roared outside, indifferent to my pain. My son, my only child, had allowed his wife to sell the last thing Peter and I had built together. Without even asking me, without even telling me. I looked around at the walls lined with photographs. Daniel as a boy, holding a seashell to his ear. Peter and I laughing under the old porch light. Every memory was wrapped in that house's wooden frame, and now someone had put a price tag on it. The next day, I drove back to town, the road blurring through my tears. I went straight to the real estate office listed on the sign. The receptionist looked up with a practiced smile. "Good morning, ma'am. Are you here to inquire about a property?" "Yes," I said, my voice trembling. "The beach house on Harbor Lane, listed under Coastal Realty." Her smile faltered. "Oh, you must be Mrs. Adams." I nodded. "Marie isn't in right now," she said quickly, "but I can show you the listing details." She turned the monitor toward me. And there it was. Photos of my house, my rooms, my memories, now neatly staged with captions like "Coastal Charm meets Modern Potential. Price, $1.2 million. I clenched my fists. My chest ached with something deeper than anger, betrayal. "Take it down," I said quietly. "I'm sorry, ma'am." "I don't have authorization. Take it down!" I snapped, louder than I meant to. Heads turned in the office. The young woman looked terrified. I took a shaky breath, lowered my voice. "Please." "That house belongs to me." She typed something quickly, checking records. Then her face paled. "It says here the property is under the name Daniel and Marie Adams. Joint ownership." My heart stopped. I remembered signing some papers last year. Daniel had said it was for property tax simplification. I hadn't looked too closely. I trusted my son. My knees weakened. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I nodded numbly. "Yes. I just need to go." I stumbled out into the sunlight, the salty breeze hitting my face like a slap. I felt foolish, betrayed, but mostly utterly alone. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old floorboard, every distant wave felt like a reminder of what was slipping through my fingers. By morning, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to let my husband's memory, my home, be sold without a fight. But first, I needed to understand how deep this betrayal really went, and as it turned out, it was deeper than I ever imagined. Before the chaos, my life had a rhythm you could set your watch to. Mornings began with the rattle of the old kettle and the soft groan of the porch swing as I sat to watch the line where ocean met sky. I'd butter toast while it was still too hot, the butter melting into little golden pools, and I'd drizzle honey over it the way Peter liked. Sometimes I'd talk to him out loud. "You wouldn't believe the pelicans today, Pete," I'd say, and I'd smile at nothing in particular. On Tuesdays, I volunteered at the church thrift shop. I sorted shirts and mugs with faded slogans, and I listened to people's stories as though they were rare shells brought in by the tide. On Fridays, I cooked a pot of chowder big enough for neighbors to happen by. That's what we called it, happening by. It meant you didn't have to ring the bell or bring a gift or ask permission. You just came with your appetite and your day, and we folded you in. Daniel used to happen by too. In the early days after he married Marie, he'd show up with a six-pack and a tight smile, the kind of smile that says, "I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy," as though repeating it will make it true. He was a finance man now, the kind who measured his day in calls per hour and his success by the fatness of his calendar. But with me, he would soften. He'd kick off those polished shoes and dig his toes into the sand like a little boy again. He called me Ma, the way his father did when he was teasing. Marie came less often. When she did, she'd bring a bottle of wine wrapped in crisp tissue and a bouquet so perfectly arranged it made my wild garden look like a tangle of weeds. She would talk about square footage and comp values as if they were languages everyone knew. To be fair, she could be kind in flashes. Once, she noticed the calluses on my fingers from the pruning shears and pressed a small jar of hand cream into my palm without making a speech of it. "You'll like the smell," she said. "Citrus and cedar." She was right. I did. Still, there were these little moments, sharp and almost invisible, where I felt her eyes skim the edges of my life the way people skim clutter in a room, making mental notes on what to toss. She was efficient with people like she was with closets: keep, donate, sell. I tried to forgive those moments. I told myself she didn't mean to shrink our world with her words. And I told myself Daniel would always know where home was. For a long time, that felt true. One afternoon, months before the sign appeared, I was kneading dough at the kitchen counter. I'd rolled up my sleeves, flour dusting my forearms, when Daniel came in with a binder tucked under his arm. He kissed my cheek, the binder thunking onto the table with all the importance of a new law. "Ma, I need your signature on a couple of things," he said. "Too bright, too smooth." "What things?" "Property tax adjustments. Just routine, saves you money. You know how the county keeps changing the assessment." "Uh-huh." I wiped my hands on a towel and poured him coffee. He took it black these days, like his father. "You read through it?" "Of course," he said, eyes skittering away. "All good." I traced the rim of my mug. "You sure this is for me, not for you?" He laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that doesn't use the lungs. "Both, I guess." "We're family, Ma." I signed. I didn't read every line. That decision would sit in my stomach for a long time, heavy as a stone. The house had its moods, and I learned to listen. The screen door announced arrivals with a friendly squeal. The stairs sighed under familiar feet. The wind moved the curtains like a slow hand. If something was off, I could feel it the way you feel a migraine before it comes. The first odd thing happened on a quiet Thursday when I was alone. I noticed a faint solvent smell in the living room, like fresh paint but tidier, chemical and clean. The bookshelf had been lightly rearranged, the heavy books shuffled to the bottom, the decorative shelves lined up straight. My aunts used to say spirits tidied in the night, but I don't believe in that. I believe in people. I called Daniel. "Were you here?" I asked. "No," he said. "Why? Things look staged," he chuckled. "Maybe you did it and forgot." I didn't. A pause. "I'll check with Marie. Maybe she stopped by." "Why would she do that without telling me?" I asked, but he had already moved on to something about a meeting. "Gotta run, Ma." Later that week, I found a glossy card tucked under the porch mat for Coastal Realty, Marie's firm. "Considering selling your coastal gem? Now is the time." The font was friendly, the kind that pretends to be a neighbor. I felt my face flush hot, even though there was no one to see it. I slid the card into the junk drawer and closed it gently, the way you close a door on a crying child, hoping the sound will settle. At church, our pastor preached that Sunday about trust being a rope. "You braid it from small kindnesses until it holds," he said. "But you can also pick it apart with tiny cuts." I thought of signing papers I hadn't read. I thought of Daniel's eyes always moving. I thought of Marie's saleslady smile that never quite reached the bones of her face. I went home and baked a lemon loaf, as if sweetness could patch the fray. Spring crept in with longer afternoons, with gulls swooping lower for fish, with tourists returning like seasonal birds. The house wore spring well. The shutters looked whiter, the blue trim bluer, as though the whole place had woken up to flirt with the sun. Around that time, Marie began texting more often. Little things at first. "How are you? Need anything from town?" Then questions that made me tilt my head. "Have you ever had the house appraised? Do you have a recent survey? Who handled the deed when you and Peter built?" Each one was framed as help, but together they built a picture that made my shoulders tense. I answered slowly, the way you answer a child asking where you hide the keys. "We've had appraisals over the years," I wrote. "Why? Just curious," she replied. "Market's interesting right now. You could get top dollar if you ever decided to, downsize, be closer to us." I put the phone down and looked out at the line of pelicans, precise as soldiers. The word downsize clanged through my head like a dropped pot. I began to notice how often Marie used absolutes. "You always seem tired out there. Those stairs are dangerous for you. That neighborhood is changing." She said it all with a soft tone, and a hand on my elbow as if she were rescuing me from the very life I had built. One evening, Daniel and Marie came by on the way to a dinner. He hovered near the window, watching the street like someone expecting a delivery. Marie wore a white blouse too crisp for a place where salt hangs in the air like powder. We ate chowder while it was practically boiling, no time to let it cool. Conversation jumped like a skipped stone. Marie set down her spoon. "Mom," she said. "Mom," I noted, not the usual Mrs. Adams. "Have you ever thought about how much maintenance this house requires? Perhaps we could help manage it for you. We're already handling the taxes." I looked at Daniel. He studied the chips in his bowl as if they were maps. "We're just thinking long term," he muttered. "What are you planning long term?" I asked. The room was very quiet. The tick of the old kitchen clock felt like it was counting down to something. "Nothing," he said quickly. "Just options." After they left, I stood at the sink and let the water run until it went from warm to cold to warm again. Options has a way of meaning plans when spoken by people who draw charts for a living. In the weeks that followed, small invasions became routine. A business card here. A measuring tape left on the porch with a realtor's logo. A polite voicemail from a home stager who understood I might be preparing to list. Each time, Daniel insisted it was an error, a mix-up at the office, a miscommunication. "I'll handle it, Ma," he'd say, and his voice would be gentle enough that I wanted to believe him. But a rope phrase one fiber at a time. The last ordinary day came like any other. I woke to the slap of waves and the soft cry of gulls. I brewed coffee and watched the foam move like lace on the water. I watered the lemon tree and pinched off a dead blossom with my thumb and forefinger. When the breeze lifted, I breathed it in, a blend of salt and sun that I wished I could bottle. Then I drove into town for groceries, and when I came back, there it was, the sign. What broke me most wasn't the boldness of the letters, but the slight tilt of the stake, as if whoever had hammered it into the sand had been too impatient to center it. Careless. That's how betrayal often looks from the outside, just a little careless. The sign was the storm. But the barometer had been falling for months. That night, I sat in my father's old rocking chair and studied the legal folder I had never wanted to open. I slid the papers out and read every word now, every clause that said my name and someone else's. There it was, in black and white, title held jointly by Daniel and Marie. It felt like learning your own name had been mispronounced for a year, and you'd never corrected anyone. I pressed my palm to the wood grain of the table Peter built, as if I could absorb something steady, and I told myself a truth I did not want to say out loud. This was not an accident. It was a plan. Once you say the truth, it doesn't let you sleep. It sits on the bed like a person, breathing, waiting for you to turn and look at it. In the morning, I would go find the source of that solvent smell, the tidy bookshelf, the measuring tape, the cards, the sign, the earlier signature, thread each clue through a needle and stitch them together. And when the seam was finished, I would have to see what shape the truth made. It would not be pretty, but it would be mine. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The sea was calm, too calm, like it knew something I didn't. I wrapped my shawl tight around my shoulders and sat on the porch, the boards cool under my bare feet. I watched the horizon blush pink, trying to gather my thoughts the way a mother gathers laundry before a storm. The papers still lay open on the kitchen table behind me, legal, official, final. They looked so small, so harmless, for something that could change an entire life. When Daniel was little, I used to tell him, always read what you sign, even if you trust the person handing you the pen. He'd roll his eyes, say, "Ma, you worry too much." Turns out, I hadn't worried enough. By 8 o'clock, I was sitting in my car outside Daniel's office, a tall glass building downtown that looked more like a mirror than a place for people. The receptionist, all red lipstick and cold perfume, asked if I had an appointment. "No," I said, my voice steady. "But I'm his mother." That seemed to open doors. It always does, until it doesn't. Daniel's office was bigger than I expected. The walls were white, the shelves lined with awards and certificates, and a photograph of him and Marie in matching blue stood on the desk. They looked like a magazine couple, perfectly lit, perfectly posed, perfectly distant. He looked surprised to see me. "Mom, you should have called. Is everything okay?" I shut the door behind me. "You tell me," he blinked. "What do you mean?" I said, my voice trembling but controlled. "Why is my house listed for sale without my permission? Why does your name sit on the deed beside your wife's? And why did you lie to me about those papers?" He sighed, the kind of sigh men use when they think patience will make them right. "Mom, it's not like that." "Then tell me what it's like." He rubbed his forehead. "Look, things have been tight lately. Marie's firm hit a slow season. My business partner pulled out of a deal. We needed a way to stay afloat. So you decided to sell my home." "It's our home now," he said quietly. "Technically?" That word, technically, hit harder than any shout could. "Technically," I repeated, my voice a whisper. "You mean you used my trust, my grief, to trick me into giving you part of my house?" He stood up, hands on the desk, like he needed height to hold power. "Mom, you have to understand, it's not just about money. That house is sitting on prime land. It's worth more now than ever. You could buy something smaller, easier to manage. You're alone out there." "I'm home out there," I said, my voice sharp enough to make him flinch. "That house is the last piece of your father I have left." "Dad's gone," he said softer. "He wouldn't want you struggling." I laughed, bitter, hollow. "Don't you dare speak for him." He looked away, guilt flickering across his face like a shadow. Marie thought, I cut in, she could make a profit off my husband's memory. She thought she could push me out quietly, sell what isn't hers, and smile while she did it. He didn't answer. Silence filled the room like thick fog. Finally, I said, "Tell me the truth. Did she plan this?" He hesitated, eyes darting toward the door, as if the truth might walk out if he waited long enough. She mentioned the idea, he admitted. She said it could help us. I didn't think she'd actually what, Daniel? My voice cracked. Actually sell it? Actually erase your father's name from the place he built with his hands? Actually make your mother a guest in her own life? His shoulders slumped. I'm sorry, Mom. Sorry doesn't change a deed. I turned and walked out before the tears could win. The receptionist tried to smile as I passed, but I couldn't see her through the blur in my eyes. By the time I reached home, the sky had clouded over. The sign still stood in the sand, mocking me. I yanked it out with both hands and threw it to the ground, the wood splintering where it hit. The wind was picking up, a storm brewing off the coast. Inside, I poured myself tea I didn't drink and sat by the window, watching the sea turn silver and restless. I needed to know if it was true, if the sale had gone through, or if there was still time to stop it. So I called the realty office again. This time, Marie answered. Coastal Realty, this is Marie speaking. For a moment, I couldn't find words. Just hearing her voice, calm, polished, professional, made my stomach twist. Marie, I said finally. It's me. A pause. Oh, hello, Mother. Her tone shifted too bright. I was going to call you today, actually. Were you? I said flatly. Yes. We had a wonderful offer come in this morning. Full asking price. My breath caught. You mean you already— It's not finalized yet, of course, she said quickly. Just verbal for now. But it's a great opportunity, and I really think— Stop. My voice came out sharper than I intended. You sold my home without telling me. Without my consent. Well, she said, her voice soft and syrupy. Technically, the paperwork allows either party to make a decision regarding sale. Provided— I don't care what it technically allows, I snapped. That house isn't yours to sell, she sighed. You're making this harder than it has to be, Mother. Think about it. You'll have more money, less responsibility. You can travel, rest, maybe move closer to us. It's what Daniel wants. Daniel doesn't even know what he wants anymore, I said quietly. Silence stretched. Then her voice hardened, losing all the sweetness. You're being sentimental, and it's clouding your judgment. It's just a house. No, I said, steady now. It's my life. And I hung up. That night, I didn't cry. I couldn't. Grief had turned into something colder, a slow, steady resolve. If Marie thought she could strip my home away through signatures and smiles, she was mistaken. I might have been naive once, but I wasn't weak. I stayed up late, going through every drawer, every file, every envelope Peter and I had ever signed. Somewhere in that paper trail, there had to be a way back. And as the wind howled outside and the first drops of rain began to fall against the window, I found it, a folder at the back of Peter's old desk. Inside was his will, and in that will, clear as day, was one line that made my breath hitch. The Harbor Lane property is to remain in the sole possession of my wife, Margaret Adams, until her death, not ours, not shared, mine. Peter had protected me, even from beyond the grave, and that's when I knew the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The rain didn't stop all night. It came in waves, pelting against the roof like an army of angry hands. I sat at the kitchen table with Peter's will spread out before me, the edges curled and soft with age. My tea had gone cold hours ago, but I didn't move. I couldn't. For the first time in months, I felt something close to power return to my bones. That single line in Peter's handwriting, his signature inked in blue, was more than legal proof. It was a lifeline. It was him reaching across the years to hold my hand again. I picked up my phone and called Daniel. He didn't answer. I tried again. Still nothing. I left a message, my voice shaking with controlled fury. Daniel, it's your mother. We need to talk about your father's will. Call me as soon as you can, please. But he didn't. Not that morning, not that day. By evening, the silence had hardened into something cruel. So I decided to act. I drove to the courthouse first thing the next morning, Peter's will sealed in a folder under my arm. The clerk, a young man with tired eyes and a tie too tight for his neck, helped me file a notice of dispute over the sale. The law was on my side. That much he confirmed with a sympathetic nod. If the property was intended for your sole possession, he said, Then any attempt to sell without your consent could be invalid. It'll take time, but you can stop the sale for now. I thanked him, my voice steadier than I felt. From there, I went straight to Coastal Realty. Again. The bell chimed as I entered, and heads turned. They remembered me from before, the trembling old woman begging them to take down a listing. This time I wasn't trembling. Marie was there. She looked surprised at first, then composed herself, folding her hands neatly on the desk. She was dressed in cream, her lipstick perfect, the picture of control. "Mother," she said, standing up. "What a surprise. Sit down, Marie." My tone left no room for performance. She blinked, then slowly obeyed. "If this is about the house—" "It is," I said, laying the folder between us. "Peter's will states that I am the sole owner until my death, which means you have no right to list or sell it." Her face changed, not dramatically, just slightly, like a crack forming in polished glass. "I don't know where you found that," she said carefully, "but the deed is joint. The will might be outdated." "Outdated?" I repeated, opening the folder. "It's dated 6 months before Peter passed. The deed transfer you arranged came after his death. I checked the registry. You filed it last year." Her fingers twitched, just slightly. "That was Daniel's idea," she said finally, her voice clipped. I shook my head. "No, Marie, that was yours. He may have signed, but you guided his hand." She leaned back, crossing her legs. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. Look, I understand this house means something to you, but it's just wood and paint. The market is perfect right now. You could make enough to live comfortably anywhere." "I already live comfortably," I said. She laughed, a soft, humorless sound. "Comfort is subjective. Don't you want to be near family? We could find you a place close to us, something easier to manage." "You're not getting any younger," the words landed sharp as needles. I could feel my heartbeat thudding in my throat, but I smiled anyway, that quiet kind of smile that frightens people because it's too calm. "You know, Marie," I said, "I used to think you were just ambitious. Now I see you're desperate." Her smile faltered. "Excuse me? You wanted that house because you couldn't build one of your own," I said softly. "You wanted something beautiful to claim, to make yours, because all you have is borrowed." For a moment, she looked genuinely rattled. But then she gathered herself, standing, smoothing her blouse. "If you're going to accuse me of something, I suggest you bring a lawyer." "Oh, I will," I said, rising too. "But not before I bring the truth." By the time I got home, the storm had passed. The air was clear, the sea calm again. That deceptive calm that comes after destruction. I called my neighbor, Mr. Hayes, who had been a property attorney before retiring. He came over that afternoon, bringing a folder of legal pads and a thermos of black coffee. He read through the documents carefully, humming under his breath. When he finished, he nodded. "You're in the right," he said. "This transfer looks suspicious. The will supersedes it unless you explicitly signed away your rights. And from what I see here, you didn't." "I didn't even read what I was signing," I admitted. "Daniel said it was for tax simplification," Hayes sighed. "They took advantage of your trust. But we can fix this. You'll need to file an injunction to block the sale. I'll help you draft it." For the first time in weeks, I felt my lungs fill properly. As we worked, the sun began to set, painting the room in gold. The house smelled of coffee and salt, grounding, familiar. When Hayes left, he paused at the door. "Margaret," he said, "this won't just be legal. It's going to be emotional. Are you ready for that?" I thought about Daniel, his boyish grin, his easy laugh, the way he used to run down the beach with a kite string tangled in his hands. And then I thought about his voice on the phone saying, "It's our home now." "Yes," I said quietly. "I'm ready." 2 days later, Daniel showed up at my door. He didn't knock. He just stood there in the doorway, looking older somehow, not in years, but in spirit. "Mom," he said, his voice heavy, "Marie told me you filed an injunction." I did. He stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. "Why?" I looked at him for a long moment. "You really need to ask that?" He rubbed his face. "Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion. We were trying to help." "Help?" I laughed bitterly. "By lying? By tricking me into signing papers? By selling my home out from under me? He flinched. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Marie said you'd understand once you saw how much money you'd get. We thought— No, Daniel, I cut him off. You didn't think. You let her think for you. He looked up sharply. That's not fair, isn't it? I said, stepping closer. Because the son I raised, the boy who used to fix broken shells with glue because he couldn't stand to see something precious ruined, would never have done this. His eyes welled, but he blinked it away. I'm sorry, he said finally. I don't know what to say. Then don't, I whispered. Just listen. The sale is blocked. The will is valid. And until I die, that house stays mine. Your father made sure of it. He swallowed hard, staring at the floor. Marie's not going to like that. I smiled, small but certain. She doesn't have to. He nodded slowly, a broken kind of nod. Then he turned and left, the door closing behind him with a sound that felt final, like the last page of a chapter snapping shut. That night, the house was quiet. I stood by the window, looking out at the moonlit sand. The broken "For Sale" sign still lay near the porch, half buried by wind. I didn't move it. Let it stay there, I thought. A reminder, because some things, trust, love, home, are not for sale, not at any price. For a few days after Daniel's visit, silence became my closest companion. Not peaceful silence. No, this was a dense, heavy kind, the kind that presses down on your ribs and reminds you of what's been lost. I'd go about my day, sweeping the porch, trimming the lemon tree, washing dishes that didn't need washing. And in every small act, I'd hear echoes of old conversations. Peter's laugh, Daniel's childhood chatter, Marie's polished voice cutting through them like glass. The injunction hearing was scheduled for the following week. Word traveled fast in a town as small as ours. People who had once waved casually now lingered at the end of my driveway, pretending to check their mail while trying to catch a glimpse of the woman who had sued her own son. Some offered support, a kind squeeze on the arm at the grocery store, a pie left anonymously on my doorstep. Others whispered behind hands, poor woman, must be losing her mind. Let them whisper, I thought. Truth doesn't need a crowd. 3 days before the hearing, I got a call from Coastal Realty again. It wasn't Marie this time. It was her assistant, voice tight and nervous. Mrs. Adams, I just wanted to inform you that we've paused all listings related to the Harbor Lane property pending the legal review. I'm sorry for the confusion. Confusion. That word again? The polite way to describe betrayal. I thanked her and hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked down to the shore, the sand cold and damp beneath my feet. The moon floated low, painting the water in ribbons of silver. I remembered the night Peter and I first stepped onto this beach, barefoot, laughing, planning a life we thought would stretch forever. Look at that, Maggie, he'd said, pointing to the stars. Even the sky's jealous of what we have. And we'd built this house under that jealous sky, never imagining it could someday become a battlefield. I bent down, picked up a shell, and held it to my ear. The ocean's hum filled it, the same sound that had soothed me through grief, through loneliness, through everything. Help me, Pete, I whispered. Help me stay strong. The courthouse smelled like paper and coffee. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded neatly, trying to look composed even though my heart was hammering. Across the room, Marie and Daniel sat together. She was calm, unnervingly calm, her posture perfect, her hair unmoved. Daniel looked smaller somehow, pale and restless. The judge, a woman with gray hair and a steady gaze, began the session. My neighbor, Mr. Hayes, handled most of the speaking. He presented Peter's will, explained the suspicious transfer, and highlighted the timeline that showed how I'd been misled. When it was Marie's turn to speak, her lawyer painted a different picture, one of concern, efficiency, love. My client acted only in the family's best interest, he said smoothly. She sought to alleviate the burden of maintenance and ensure Mrs. Adams's financial security. Marie nodded along, eyes flicking toward me as if expecting gratitude. When the judge asked if I wished to say anything, I rose slowly. My knees ached, but my voice didn't waver. Your Honor, I said softly, I may not know much about business or deeds or legal clauses, but I do know what trust looks like, and I know what it feels like when that trust is broken. My husband and I built that house with our hands, with love. It wasn't an investment. It was a promise, to our family, to our memories, to the life we shared. No one has the right to sell a promise. The courtroom was quiet. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. The judge nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Adams." After that, everything moved in a blur. Closing statements, legal jargon, murmured objections. And then, finally, the verdict. The judge ruled in my favor. The attempted sale was declared void. The deed transfer to Daniel and Marie was revoked, pending formal correction of ownership under the will. Marie's face drained of color. Daniel's shoulders sagged as though a weight had been lifted and replaced with shame. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just sat there, hands folded, eyes closed. Justice doesn't always bring joy. Sometimes it only brings quiet relief. The aftermath came fast. News spread through town faster than gossip ever should. At church the following Sunday, whispers followed me like a shadow. "That's her, the one who took her family to court." Can you blame her? The daughter-in-law tried to steal her house. Still, poor Daniel, stuck in the middle. I kept my chin up. Let them say what they wanted. I'd rather be whispered about than walked over. Marie, though, she didn't take it well. Coastal Realty dropped her as an agent after the scandal broke. Too much negative attention, they said. A polite way of saying liability. Daniel called a few days later. His voice was low, defeated. "Mom, I wanted to tell you before you heard it from someone else. Marie and I, we're separating." I didn't answer right away. I stared out at the sea, the horizon shimmering like a held breath. "I'm sorry," he said again, quieter. "You were right. About everything." I closed my eyes. "I never wanted to be right, Daniel. I just wanted you to see what was real," he exhaled shakily. "She said I was weak for not standing up to you." "Maybe she's right." "No," I said softly. "You're not weak. You just forgot where your roots were planted." Silence stretched between us, heavy, but different now. Not full of anger, just sadness. Before we hung up, he said, "Can I come by sometime? Just to talk?" I smiled faintly. "The door's open, son. It always has been." Life after the ruling settled slowly, like sand after a storm. Neighbors started stopping by again. Not with pity, but with pies and soft smiles. Mr. Hayes brought over a bottle of wine, said, "You earned it." Even Pastor Lewis stopped one afternoon with a gentle laugh. "Didn't think we'd see you in the courtroom, Margaret." "The Lord must have been proud of your composure," I chuckled. "I was just channeling Peter." But inside, I knew it wasn't just him I'd been channeling. It was every woman who's ever been told she doesn't understand her own life. Every mother whose love was mistaken for weakness. Every widow who learned that silence can either drown you or strengthen you. The beach house stood stronger than ever. I fixed the porch railing myself, planted marigolds along the path, and painted the shutters a brighter shade of blue. Not because I needed change, but because I wanted the house to know it had survived too. A month later, Daniel came back. He stood at the edge of the porch, hands in his pockets, looking at the waves the way his father used to. "I forgot how peaceful it is here," he said quietly. "It hasn't changed," I replied. "Only you have," he nodded. "I needed to. We didn't say much else. Sometimes words just get in the way." We sat side by side on the porch swing as the sky turned amber, and for a long while, the only sound was the sea. When he finally left that evening, he hugged me. A real hug. The kind that says I'm sorry without needing to speak it. That night, I stood at the window again, looking at the moonlit sand where the old "for sale" sign once stood. It was gone now, swept away by tide or time. I whispered to the house, to the sea, to Peter. We're safe now. And for the first time in months, I believed it. Time moves differently after a storm. The days aren't quieter, they're clearer. The air feels washed, the light sharper, and even silence hums with something new. Peace. That's how it felt in the months after the hearing. Life didn't rush back in. It seeped, like the tide reclaiming sand. The house came alive again. I'd wake to the sound of waves and the smell of salt and old wood. I began cooking for one without feeling lonely about it. just present. I'd hum while slicing lemons, polish the picture frames that lined the mantel, whisper good morning to Peter's photograph. I'd thought victory would feel loud, triumphant. But instead, it felt like a long exhale after holding my breath for years. Daniel kept his promise. He started visiting again, not out of guilt, but out of love. Small steps, like a man relearning the rhythm of home. Sometimes he came alone. Other times he brought groceries or tools to fix the porch steps, or just himself and his quiet company. One Sunday, he showed up with a folder under his arm, the same kind that had once carried betrayal. "This time," he said, smiling sheepishly, "I want you to read every page before you sign anything." I raised an eyebrow. "You've learned," he nodded. "I have." Inside the folder was paperwork to officially correct the title, restoring full ownership to my name. At the bottom, Daniel's own signature already waited, steady and sincere. As I signed beside it, I realized how circular life can be. One signature had taken everything from me, and another gave it back. When I handed the pen to him, I said quietly, "It's not about the house anymore, you know." He looked up. "Then what is it about?" "Respect," I said, "and the kind of love that listens before it decides." He nodded slowly, eyes shining. "I want to be that kind of love again." The following weeks brought a kind of gentle healing between us, not dramatic, just consistent. He'd help me with repairs, I'd feed him home-cooked meals, and we'd talk about his father sometimes. One evening, as we watched the sunset from the porch, Daniel said, "You know, Marie called me last week." I turned slightly, cautious but calm. "Oh, she's moving back to the city," he said. "Starting over. She said she's sorry. For everything. Do you believe her?" I asked. He shrugged. "I think she believes herself, for now." "That's enough," I nodded. "Forgiveness doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it just means release." He smiled faintly. "You sound like Dad." I laughed softly. "Then maybe you're finally listening." That night, after Daniel left, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and the sound of the sea breathing in and out. I thought about forgiveness, how it's less like turning a page and more like mending one. The tear never fully disappears, but the story holds. I didn't hate Marie anymore. Not really. Hate is heavy, and I'd carried enough. In truth, I pitied her. A woman so focused on ownership, she forgot the warmth of belonging. Maybe she thought success would fill the empty spaces. Maybe she didn't understand that some wealth can't be measured in square footage. I wished her peace, not as a blessing, but as a boundary. Spring rolled into summer, and the beach filled again with the laughter of tourists and the distant bark of dogs chasing waves. Children built castles too close to the tide, and I'd watch them from my porch, smiling as their walls melted back into the sea. That's the thing about trying to control what's not yours. The sea always takes back what belongs to it. I started volunteering again at the church thrift shop, though people looked at me differently now, not with pity, but with respect. "Good for you, Mrs. Adams," one of the women said one afternoon as we sorted donated clothes. "Standing up for yourself like that," I smiled. Sometimes standing up is just the only thing left to do. On the anniversary of Peter's passing, Daniel joined me for dinner at the house. We cooked his favorite, fish stew with lemon and parsley. Afterward, we walked along the beach, bare feet sinking into cool sand. He stopped halfway down the shore and turned toward the water. "I used to think I'd outgrown this place," he said. "Now I realize I just didn't understand it." "It takes time," I said. "Even the tide learns its rhythm by retreating first." He smiled. "You always know what to say." Only because life made me listen. We walked in silence for a while. The moon rose, round and forgiving, the kind of moon that doesn't care who was right or wrong, only that the story found its balance again. When we got back to the house, Daniel noticed something new on the wall above the mantel. It was a framed photo, not of Peter, not of Daniel, but of the beach house itself, bathed in morning light. "I had it printed last week," I told him, "to remind me that homes aren't made of walls. They're made of the people who fight to keep them whole." He looked at it for a long moment, then whispered, "You're stronger than I ever realized." I smiled. I had a good teacher. Later that night, after he'd gone home, I sat in the quiet glow of the lamp, the smell of salt air drifting through the open window. I could hear the waves kissing the shore, steady, timeless. I opened Peter's old journal, the one I hadn't touched since his funeral. On the very first page, in his looping handwriting, were the words, "One day, this house will test you. Don't let it own you. You own your peace." Tears welled, but they weren't sad ones. They were soft, grateful. He'd been right. I closed the journal, pressed my hand against its cover, and whispered, "I did it. Pete, I kept our promise." Outside, the sea sighed, a gentle, approving sound, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something I hadn't dared to feel in months: joy. Not loud, not glittering, just quiet, grounded, real. That night, I left the porch light on, the way Peter always did when Daniel was still little and playing out late by the dunes. He used to say, "Leave the light on, Maggie, so he knows the way home." And as the waves rolled in and the light burned softly against the darkness, I realized it wasn't just for Daniel anymore. It was for me, too, because sometimes we all need to see our way back, to love, to peace, to ourselves. Sometimes, when the sun begins to set and the sea starts its long, soft song, I sit on that old porch and think about everything that happened. The lies, the papers, the betrayal, the courtroom, the forgiveness. And then I think about what remained. You see, it wasn't just the house that survived. It was me. For a long time, I believed home was the place where memories lived, where laughter once echoed, where love once grew. But now I know better. Home isn't wooden nails. It's courage. It's knowing when to stay firm and when to forgive. It's standing up even when your knees tremble and saying, "No more." When I look at that ocean, I see more than waves. I see years, each tide carrying something away, each one bringing something back. That's life, isn't it? We lose, we learn, and if we're lucky, we live enough to find meaning in both. Daniel visits often now. Sometimes he brings his son, my grandson, little Peter. And when that child runs barefoot through the sand, his laughter echoing off the waves, I feel peace settle in my bones. The kind of peace you can't buy, can't sell, can't sign away, the kind you have to earn. And every night, before I close the porch light, I whisper to the wind, maybe to Peter, maybe to the sea, maybe to anyone still listening, some things are not for sale, not at any price. So if you're watching this and you've ever had something or someone try to take from you what's yours, don't let them. Not your voice, not your dignity, not your peace. Because once you stand your ground, even the waves learn your name. Would you have done what I did? Tell me in the comments, my dears. And don't forget to subscribe. Sometimes the stories we survive are the ones the world most needs to hear. Auntie May's voice fades with the sound of waves and the hum of a distant porch light.